Hey, people-centric leaders. Something's been on my mind recently, and it's been on my mind enough that I actually wrote an article about it. And that article just recently appeared in the Springfield Business Journal here in Springfield, Missouri, spj.net. If you want to go check it out, you can Google the name Harkey because it's my article, and they put it in there, so it's an easy way to find it. And it's on courageous leadership. And the reason it's been on my mind is as we work with different clients, one of the things that we notice is some leaders who make some really hard decisions, who make courageous decisions. And when I say leaders, that could be an executive, a CEO deciding to change something that's been around for a long time, or it could be a middle manager who's deciding to change a process that's been going on, or to combine some teams, or it could be a frontline employee who's been with a company for a while and raises their hand and says, "Hey, I want to be promoted, or I want to raise, or I want to move up, apply for a supervisor job." Those are all courageous decisions that leaders make. But what I have noticed is that there are also a lot of people who would like to change those things who don't, who are scared of something and they're struggling to get past that fear. So in the article, what I talk about is this idea of courageous leadership. And why do leaders struggle with that fear? What causes that fear? What do people get stuck on? And then how can you overcome that? And do you have a responsibility to overcome it? And hint, in the article, I said, I think you do. If you take on a leadership position, especially, the more responsibility you take on, the more responsibility you also have to potentially fail by making decisions that might mess some things up or upset some other folks. So we're going to talk a little bit about tipping over the apple cart today, and see if you as a leader, whether you're a frontline employee working within your area, middle manager, top level executive, wherever you're at, I think there'll be something in this for you, because the question you can be is, I wonder, what decisions do you think you should make that you're afraid of making? Why aren't you making those? And then maybe how can you make those decisions in the best possible way to ensure the best possible outcome? So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm really excited about this. You're getting a good chunk of our team together here today. Also, here at People Centric, just so you know what's going on behind the scenes, it's Soup Day. It's Soup Day at People Centric. So I want to talk a little bit about Soup Day.
It's the soup or bowl, we decided.
The Super Bowl. So we live in Missouri, and the Super Bowl, the Kansas City Chiefs, who've been 5 out of the last 6 Super Bowls, did not show up to this one. I mean, they came, but they didn't play very well. We love them anyway. You guys did a great. You guys tried, maybe tried really hard. It wasn't a very good game. It was rough. So we decided to have a Super Bowl. So Bethany is with us here. Bethany, this is your jam, I think, a lot, like
Yeah.
soups and stuff like that, right? So like in the wintertime when it's cold outside. So what soup did you bring?
I brought a creamy chicken noodle soup. And I mean, because I think we've all had chicken noodle soup and it's fine, but this is like creamy chicken noodle. And so it's just like very warming and just like fills your soul. And that's what you want with soup, is it's got to
Wow.
hit the soul just right.
Sometimes you put soup in a bowl, sometimes you put soup in your soul. And apparently the little bit of cream just coats it and makes it go down and
Right.
makes it stick to the things that are important to us. I love it. That's good.
I think that needs I need that on a sweatshirt. Some
Okay.
simple.
We
So
got we got a side business popping up here. I like that. I could do that. All
I
right.
think that's a great, yeah.
We've got one of our clients makes shirts. We can have we'll give our friends over at Viatran a call and give them a free shout out here on the podcast. If you need your apparel done, they'll take care of you. So that'll be fun. Okay, so that's courageous, the decision to add cream to soup. Like that's a chicken soup. I'm going to take a classic, but I'm going to do something different with it. There's a moment like I've made the soup and I put all the extra stuff into it, so I'm tying it all together. Philip, tell us about your Philip, who's always with us here. Philip, tell us about your soup that you're bringing in, and tell us the courageous decisions that you made to lead to that soup.
Well, I love our emotional intelligence quiz, and I score high in cultural sensitivity. And that matters because one of our team members is vegan, and I love to cook with chicken. Chicken broth is my favorite, but I was courageous, branched out. It might be crap. We'll see. But I branched out. I made a vegan kale and sweet potato soup with only veggies in it and some curry, some turmeric. It was amazingly beautiful to make. The smell was fantastic, and it did stain my white dishcloth because, turmeric, curry, all the fun. My dog was very jealous. My wife was very jealous. But again, we'll see. I definitely added a lot of salt at the end. So I'm excited to see how this goes. It's the first
There-
time I've made it this way.
That'll be fun. Well, every time you see that yellow stain cloth, it'll become a recurring theme in
Ooh,
your kitchen.
nice one, Don.
Did you
Very
like that? That's
That was
pretty
very
good.
courageous in itself. The puns are your sense of courage for sure.
Yeah. No, I like that you said that's hard to be able to go, okay, I'm going to bring a soup for everybody. I'm going to try to make a new soup. But I
But
like that you brought it back to like your cultural sensitivity. I like
I'll
that.
say I trust also. I was like, we have great odds around here, unlike the Chiefs. My soup could utterly fail, and I know that between you, Bethany, Ashley, Stephanie, the soup game will not be harmed. So it's easy to take risks when you have a great team.
If you can be in our office right now, the smells filling our office because we're doing this right literally before this. Like the next thing we're gonna do is jump into these soups. Not like physically because it's incredibly scalding hot, but like just eat them carefully. But it's gonna coat our souls and it's gonna be delicious. Coat our souls and dirty our bowls. That's what's about to happen. It's gonna be amazing. So good. So good. Line of t-shirts. Diana is with us, but she's not with us. Diana gets to be with us, and we'll have her with us. Like I'm sure we're gonna pop you up on our screen here, and you can, right? But what are you doing for Super Bowl day from afar?
I made a Japanese curry and it is delicious. I feel like it was courageous to go curry, but I'm the only one eating it, so it wasn't that
Oh,
courageous
you're
the second one.
courageous.
It's Curry Aegis
Courageous.
leadership. That's why we switched to the soup discussion. People are like, "Why are you talking about soup?" When you say courageous, I don't know. We say Curry Aegis leadership.
Courageous leadership. Yeah. It's got like onions and carrots and potatoes and ground turkey, and it's in this like golden turmeric spicy sauce. It's delicious.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That
It's
You're
sounds
all
really,
about ground turkey.
I use a lot of ground turkey. I don't, that's a weird, yeah, I do.
You're all about ground turkey. I
that's
hear you talk
honestly.
about ground turkey
Why do you
about
think that? What's wrong with you?
I mean, I would use ground chicken too. We don't eat a lot of beef in our home, which is
Also, it's cheaper right now,
it is cheaper.
which
Yeah.
is nice,
You're-
healthy and cheaper.
It's a compliment, really. You're a well-grounded person. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But the okay, so the curry is not the best part of the meal. The best part of the meal will be the homemade sourdough loaf.
Mm,
That's the best part.
That.
And you just need the curry to like use the bread to dip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
okay.
That's good.
It's just an
Yeah.
excuse to eat bread.
It is really. Yeah, it is
That's
really.
why I eat soup.
But when you have like amazing bread, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
I love it. Okay.
It's
Well,
it's surprisingly, I mean, we could talk about soup for a while, and I know we have another topic, but last time me and Stephanie were traveling to San Antonio, we went into the United Club or something, and because we had a decent layover, and they had soups just ready for us, and I think I ate 5 bowls of soup. It was like so the best thing. And we were like a little bit like we had colds, so it was great.
that was great.
Amazing.
That
That's a
was
good
my
day.
January memory.
That's a good day.
It is.
Also, also shout out to our friends at Bookpage who suggested this whole thing. It started off of a whole conversation with them about soups, and it started off by making soups for the holiday, and that inspired us to say, hey, we should do a soup day. So thanks to Elizabeth and her team over at Bookpage, giving a couple shout outs today.
Good.
So my courageous soup today is not even technically a soup. We decided it's more of a stew. But I brought my chili in today, and here's the risky part about this, and I really thought about doing something different because I've been bragging on my chili. I've been talking smack about my chili for a little while. So like I've been making my own batches of chili, like a different kind of a recipe here for a few months, and I think it's really, really good. I hope this batch turned out really good. You don't really know on chili until the second day, like how it really tastes good. And today's the second day for it because I made it yesterday. So I'm excited about where this is going. But I was also like, man, I don't want the expectations to be too high. So I thought about just like, oh, I'll try making something different. But no, I swung for it. We're gonna do this.
I'm sure it's delicious. I'm sure that it's delicious and everyone's gonna love it.
Excited about it. And
It,
I
it
do
won't be
like
bad.
that it's like it's second day chili that you made that happen. So that's good.
Everybody knows that like chili needs to the ingredients need to meet each other.
It's
They
the
need to hang out.
pepper.
They need to have some good conversations. So that's important. So speaking of hanging out and having good conversations, let's jump into this courageous leadership topic. Um, First of all, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the fears. Where does the fear come from? Because if you're being courageous, you're overcoming a fear. And I've always liked I like history, and I learn about a lot about like war and things. And one of the things you always hear about people who have courageous moments is they say courageousness is not the lack of fear, it's handling the fear. So let's look at the fear. What is the fear? What makes people afraid of making decisions in the workplace?
I have some good friends from Iran that we were with a little while ago, also eating soup. That's the last time we'll talk about soup. But one of the things they shared, just, it's been snowing around here, and they said there's this saying in Iran, which is when you see a big house, you're like, oh, it's in Persian, which is way more beautiful. So this is me paraphrasing. Oh, very nice house, but with a big roof comes a greater weight of the snow. And I think that's why leadership is so scary because, on an org chart, the higher up you go, kind of really it is the wider your roof becomes. There's way more people impacted by the decisions that you make or don't make. So I think one thing that really is scary as leader is if things go well, maybe we think of how well things can go. But I think we see a lot of people who will say, but what if things don't go well? And that could really screw up this roof for everyone. And then that means it might not be my roof anymore. I might not be here. And maybe you over bigify that fear. But I think sometimes it's the effects on others, and then especially yourself and your own longevity that scares people from making courageous decisions.
That's a great point. I like that how you said like the roof. That's beautiful. Like the bigger the house, the bigger the roof, the bigger the load of the snow, which means the more weight that's going to carry, right? So that's really good. So the more influence you have inside of an organization, the bigger of an impact it can make, even small decisions. Sometimes I'm thinking of like small decisions that I've seen being made, and a couple I've made fun of in this podcast recently. Like I was thinking, I called out like the CEO of 3M when I first when the, who came in from GE, who decided to give out presents to everybody for their 100-year anniversary, and they decided to pick out a mineral from the original mines, which looks just like a rock you would find outside, and how much that backfired internally. Like it's a simple decision. I'll bet he didn't spend a lot of time making that decision. I'll bet their executive team was like, we need to come up with something. Oh, we have the original mineral. Okay, great. Let's put that into a bag and let's give that to everybody. Okay, that's great. I'll bet they didn't spend a lot of time thinking about that decision. But it had a significant internal impact because everybody basically got a rock. We were expecting some kind of a gift, and we got literally like it looked like a rock you picked up from the parking lot. It's literally what it looked like in a felt bag that said 3M on the outside, and then you opened it up and it said rock on there. And then people immediately started sharing from like the Charlie Brown Christmas special or Halloween special when he opens the bag. He's like, "Oh, I got a candy bar. I got an apple. I got a rock." So that started going around the company. So you could see how maybe leaders might be afraid of making some decisions when things like that happen and there's potential backlash.
Everyone's kind of afraid of making decisions, even if you're not like a leader and carrying a big burden. This is still your job, and you still have to have money. And like, what if they fire you? What if they're like, you're dumb, you can't work here, you're now fired? Like, that seems like it could happen.
Yeah, does it happen a lot?
I doubt it, but it feels like it could happen, and so you just don't want to do that.
I think everyone, for how little it happens, I feel like there's a lot of places you go where there's at least one story, right? That whether someone experienced it somewhere else or you heard it from a friend, where like one person's really big mistake cost them their job, right? So it may not actually be that common, to your point, Don, but I do think that people have a very personal story close in their minds when they think about that risk.
Depends on the level of influence, right? Too, because I think I mean, we started talking about football and the Chiefs, and I would just say that is an industry where if you make a very visible mistake, you're out of there as a coach. So don't lose too many games. Don't lose the right games.
Yeah, they have
And
the technology to be able to know like the percentages now. Like they'll know in the moment, like, okay, it's 4th and 1 and I need to go for it. So if you miss it and you don't get that 1 yard, it's a big deal because the other team gets so much extra yardage. Like if you're not a football person, it's bad. It's really bad. It's a high risk, high reward decision. If you get it, you might get to keep going on the drive and you might score. And now they have analytics where they can feed to the coach real time. 70% of the time, if you go for it in this situation, it's going to be good. 30% is going to be bad. But a lot of times coaches will, if you make that decision, you make it wrong, even if you made the decision that was right, technically, statistically, and the unlikely thing happens and you fail, you're absolutely right. The fans are all over you, right? And you could actually, if coach has been fired for decisions like that, right?
Yeah, and the same goes for like the team members. So if they fumble a ball, I don't really know what I'm talking about here, so just go with me. If they fumble a ball, then their teammates are going to be like, "What that? You messed it up for the rest of us." And I don't think that any of us want to be ostracized for making a mistake either, or for choosing the wrong thing, because we're all a part of this like little team. And if we make a decision that everybody hates and it affects everyone, then we don't really belong anymore. And I don't want to get kicked out. I don't want to hate coming to work every day because I made a bad decision.
Yeah, that's one of the people-centric truths. We break it down into 8 truths. 7 of them are based on science and one's based on philosophy. And one of those truths is that we are all part of a village and we want to be part of that village. And it goes back to a very anthropological idea that we survive better in numbers, right? So if I am a frontline employee and I want to raise my hand to get a promotion, one of the risks that I have is if I get that supervisor job and now suddenly I'm supervising everybody else, that everybody else won't like me anymore. I can't hang out with people in the cafeteria and talk with them. My friends are going to look at me differently because now I have to do their performance appraisals. Like those are things, those are real fears that we have that strike us. It reminds me of there's an example in the book Freakonomics. So they talk about soccer players when they kick free kicks, when they get penalty kicks. So if you're kicking a penalty kick in soccer, and I'm not a huge soccer fan, so I've learned a lot of this from reading the story. When you kick a penalty kick, you are close to the goal and it's just you and the goalie. It's just a kicker and the goalie, and you're kicking at the goalie. And the goalie has almost no time to react to where the ball's going. So if you ever watch a penalty kick being done, the goalie will choose where they're going to try to block the shot before the ball is kicked. Because if you wait till the ball's kicked, the ball gets there faster than the goalie can. So the goalie will guess which way you're going to go. Are you going to go to the left? Or are you going to go to the right? Which direction are you going to go? Statistically, every professional soccer player knows where to kick it. And statistically, the best place, where do you think the best place is to kick it on the goal? Anybody know if you've read the story? Anybody have a guess? I saw Bethany say it.
I just said like in the middle.
Have you read that story? Have you heard the story?
No, I've never read it.
Why would you say in the middle?
Because they tend to just like, I don't know, I feel like they always dive for some reason.
Yeah, you are 1,000% right. Like 90% of the time, the goalie will dive one way or the other. So if you kicked it, statistically, if you kicked it right down the middle, 90% of the time you will make the goal, which is a much higher percentage than if you kick it to the left or the right. And the statistics prove that for the kickers that do kick it down the middle, they have a much higher percentage chance of making the penalty kick. However, it is also the least common choice for kickers is to kick it down the middle. They all know this, but they tend to try to kick it to the left or to the right. Anybody want to guess why they don't want to kick it down the middle?
Because the goalie's standing right there. And like they feel like it's gonna get caught. Like that you're not gonna make it.
Yeah, imagine what it looks like if you did do that, right? Imagine if you kicked it right to the middle and the goalie just doesn't move and just catches the ball.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna look like an idiot. Like the coach is gonna be like, "What is wrong with you? Just kicked it right at it. Why did you kick it right at the goalie? What is wrong with you? Why did you do that?" Like statistically, this was the best play to do. But it shows like this need that we have as humans, this fear of being ostracized from our people, from their village. So it holds us back from making these courageous decisions. Or the big decisions for the company because you're looking at all these, I've got all these mouths to feed, or these big decisions. We were talking about before we jumped on our community college, Ozarks Technical Community College, just changed their name to Ozark Tech. And the courageousness of having to make that decision because of all the backlash that could happen from that. It seems like not a major decision, but it is a major decision. And what's the risks involved?
I was thinking of the other when you sharing the soccer example too, isn't it? I don't know if it's in the same book, but it's another sports example. But isn't it like statistically you know, in basketball, you're more likely to make it doing like a granny shot, right? Instead of shooting it any other way.
Yes,
So
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, like the world record for consecutive free throws is like in the thousands. And there's no NBA player who has ever hit, that many consecutive free throws. And they won't shoot it at granny style because you're afraid of being ostracized by your village because it looks funny. But if you shot it granny style, you would have a much more consistent, it's much easier to be more consistent shooting a free throw granny style, which means underhanded, than it is overhanded to shoot. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great example of it. So it's how to be better, but you don't because you're afraid of getting ostracized.
Not a fan of the term granny style. Just putting that out there. Don't love it.
Grampy style. How about that?
I don't love either one. Like, it's
I
just
kind of like Grampy style. We should make that a thing. Okay.
underhanded. I don't know. Through the legs. I don't know. None of it sounds good. You're right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's just been around so long I didn't even think about it. Like I just said, like we would call it that for so I learned how to play basketball. If you play basketball and you're young enough, like you can't you're not strong enough to shoot it like that, so you do it like that. But by the time I turned 19, I started trying to shoot like overhead, and that helped me a lot in my game. It gets blocked less. Um, that's a joke because usually you do that a lot younger, but that's okay. That's all right. I'm sure you're laughing in your cars as you're listening to this podcast and driving to work. So how do you overcome this fear? Like first of all, what's the impact? Let's go, let me back up one more step and say, what's the impact on organizations when we fail to make courageous decisions? What's the impact on leaders when you fail to make courageous decisions?
I think it's compounding effect. And if you can't make them, you just stop making them. And so then you don't make them. And one of the things you did share, which again, you're like, well, duh, of course. But if you feel like your hands are tied in every area, or there's a reason that nothing can be changed and nothing can be done, I think some of it comes not only just from fear, but not knowing how to do it. You might have a great idea, but you don't even know how to do it or where to start. So you're like, well, that's not my job. I guess I'll just do this. I'll kind of coast it. So I think the effect is coasting. So when people raise flags and have issues, they don't change, they're not addressed, and you don't really adapt.
Yeah, you don't evolve, you don't adapt. I love that word. Like companies have to evolve. You have to change with technology, you have to change with customer needs, you have to change with people that are coming onto your team. Like you have to change for all of those reasons. And if you're not doing that, then you're falling behind. And when you fall behind, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose the game eventually. Um, yeah. So you have to.
Yeah, we're entering into a time right now, especially of extreme change. And I know that everybody says, well, things are constantly changing in business. I disagree. They're always changing, but there's periods of faster change than others. And right now, we are in a period of hyper fast change, and it's created by some of the generational changes that are happening in the workplace. These boomers are retiring, and there's not enough Gen Xers to take their places. So millennials are taking on those roles. And millennials think very differently from boomers in how they lead companies and how they make decisions. Starting this year, the majority of B2B buyers will be millennials or younger. It's something like 71% are millennials or Gen Zs, which means that they're under the age of 40 and making business decisions on where to buy stuff. And they buy totally different than just 5 years ago when the majority of our buyers were boomers. So it's things like that in terms of what employees expect at work, what the market looks like, what your customers look like. All those things are those are moments that are really scary. I think about like Netflix. Netflix tried to sell to Blockbuster Video when Blockbuster was huge and Netflix was small. And Blockbuster was like, no, thank you. We don't need you. And now Blockbuster has one store in Oregon,
I
right?
think
So
it closed actually. I don't think it
I don't
exists
want to hear
anymore.
that. Diana, is that
Um,
true?
I think it is, yeah. Mhm.
Oh, I
Yeah.
hate that. I just watched that documentary where they talked about how like they have to fight every year to try to keep it open and how there's so many fans and people go from all over it feels like a lost opportunity there somewhere, but that's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad. I'll just go home and watch Netflix. I'm going to stop there though, because I learned that you can't say more after that statement because it sounds like something different. So these courageous decisions are important. So how do we make them? How do you get over your fear and make the courageous decisions?
I mean, the hardest way to do it is build a culture where it's okay that you say what's on your mind and you talk through things, and if you fail, it's okay. Like building a culture that failure is okay and creating that psychological safety and all of that. But there's probably in between steps.
Yeah.
Those are like the big ones, you know?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, yeah, to that point, I think there's like, I think what it's not is it's not like bulldozing people, because I think that's a difference, right? Like I guess you could be a courageous leader and just say we're making all these changes and we're gonna bulldoze through every barrier there is, and I don't care what anybody thinks. And I mean, I guess that's a way to do that. But I think there's a difference in maybe what Don is talking about too, and what he's referring to is like maybe courageous leadership when it's hard to do it, and knowing that you may not have everybody's full support, or people will still probably talk about it and not totally agree with it. But overall, like, how do you do it well? Which is, I think, a little bit of a different thing. And so I think what you're saying, Diana, is really good, that it's like, how do you create a culture that is open and ready for those changes, or those courageous decisions that need to be made. Ideally, it's being able to like point to the same problem as a whole within that, to say like, yeah, we might, like, can we all agree on something that's maybe broken here, or something that could be better here, or whatever, and then figuring out the decision for how to solve that makes it a little bit easier when you have some common ground with people, I think.
Yeah. And I also love the idea of telling the story, right? Like with the OTC thing, the Ozarks Technical College, changing it to Ozarks Tech seems like not a big deal, right? That seems just like really obvious and really easy. But when you share the why behind why they decided to do that, and the story around, oh, people were just like drawn to this brand more than they were drawn to the other brand, and people connect with it more and they're proud of that more than just the letters OTC. It's so obvious, and it's such a great story to hear that that's what people were connecting with, and that's why we are changing it. And I think the why behind what you're doing also helps fuel and deliver some of that courage for you, right? It kind of takes away the need to be super courageous. You can just tell the story.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a message there for the village, right? I'm sitting here thinking about, well, of course, if there's a courageous decision that you should make, you should be courageous and make that decision. But at the same time, when we start talking about like the village and the criticism and things that rise up, I can think of all the times where I've been critical about a decision that I saw a leader make, and said that, and then you talk to other people about it, and you're leading against that change, like you're pushing against it. I think of organizations. We work with a lot of hospitals, and sometimes they change EMRs, which is their electronic medical records, and it's software that is hugely impactful across. And those when they change, it is unbelievably impactful. It's disruptive for everybody. Um, some people, when you're in that, it's tempting. And I've been part of those kinds of changes before, where I've sat there and go, this is stupid. Why did we have to change this? Now nothing works and all that stuff. And what you're doing, and when you're complaining about that, is you're inspiring the other villagers to complain about it and push back against it and resist that change, versus saying, okay, we as a culture, when you talk about a culture, when we say culture, we think of systems, right? How do we systematically embrace the change? How do we as leaders encourage ourselves to say, yes, we know that when we make this change, it's going to fail, that we know that we're going to have to fight through this series of failures. Not that it's going to go perfectly, but it's not going to go perfectly, but we're going to solve the problem together as a team. There are 100 decisions like that made whenever a company makes a change. Like everybody has to make their own decision on whether or not they're on board with that, and then how they're going to show up to others regardless of how they feel about it. So there's a piece there that I'm just commenting myself. I feel guilty as we have a conversation for not always supporting courageous leadership decisions that I've disagreed with in my career. So sorry to everybody who I've done that to.
One thing I was thinking that I like, Don, I think any courageous decision will have dissonance and will likely have people that are not happy. And so I think ergo all our let the reader understand. See previous conversation about all the reasons why leadership is hard and why you're scared to do things. But one piece of that too, I think, is also how leaders respond when there's strong disagreement. even before, to Diana and Bethany's point, like do this well, don't steamroll things. So before, but then after, if people have shared their opinions and their input, and there's a group that's like, no, this is not the way we want to go. And that's the way, if you have to end up making that decision, all these variables being equal. I have heard, not from our clients, but I've heard a leader before refer to a group of people that kind of were those holdouts as cave people. And they had an acronym for CAVE. And I thought, wow, that is definitely not helping the situation, right? I think this leader made a good decision and went a certain direction, but then they said, this is also not someone I worked for. This was out in the community. But that idea, I think, really has always stuck with me. If you're a leader who's making a courageous decision, but your stance in life is that the people who don't agree with you are just cave people, you are theying them as much as they are theying you. And that is not productive or sustainable in the long term. And so maybe you've won one courageous decision, but I think you'll lose many future ones, as opposed to saying like, you know what, this time we disagree, but how do we move forward? As opposed to you're a cave person. So I think that's the start. And then the second piece, your question of how do you do this? I think so as a courageous leader, if you're stuck and you're not sure where to go, find the first small courageous decision you can make, even if it's as simple as moving a meeting time from a Tuesday to a Thursday, if that makes more sense, to the kind of coffee that you have in the break room. If everyone hates the coffee you have in the break room, sometimes courageous leadership can start really small.
I like that advice because your goal is to turn the we or turn the they into a we. Right. So what are some of those other tactics that you can, so you can start small. So as you get resistance, and I like you even said the coffee thing, like that. I know people are like, I'm not changing the coffee in the break room. I've heard leaders say that, like, I know we could find better, but if I change it, I changed it. I made a mistake of I stepped on the third rail of church and tried to change the coffee at church. Um, once. And man, I had so much resistance and nasty, hardcore resistance from people who had come up to me. I mean, people were rude about it, like really rude and pushed back hard about it. But I also think about how I did it. And I just said, well, that's stupid. We're changing this and I'm just going to change it. And I just changed it. So there was definitely, I did not do it well. So how do you do it well? What does doing it well look like?
When you were telling that story, it reminded me of another church story that you have about carpet in the sanctuary.
Oh, yeah.
How they wanted to make a change, right? But then they were like all of these other decisions that went with the change in the carpet. And you said to them, is this about the carpet or is it about furthering our mission? And I think that was like such a brilliant way to reframe it, instead of saying, all of these decisions are fine, but if we're making a decision, make it based on our mission instead of the individual decision itself, and think about that bigger impact. And I think that's a really good way to make a courageous decision, is by thinking about the impact it will make and the bigger mission, and not just the decision in and of itself.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Yeah, the story on there was actually my mom's church, and they were going to replace the carpet. And when they pulled the carpet back, they saw underneath it all these coffee stains. And so the council decided to say, well, maybe we should stop allowing coffee in this area where everybody congregates before they go into the worship, and so that we can keep this carpet longer. And so it split the congregation for a while. Like there was pro coffee and anti coffee sides. Like, well, I don't drink coffee anyway, and I pay for this carpet, so I don't want that. Well, we got to have coffee every morning. I don't know why I come here and da 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 da. And you're right. My mom called me. She's like, it split our church up. Like, what would you say? Because at the time I was in leadership at my church, and she said, if you were our council president, what would you say? And I said, I would ask, what's the mission of our church? What's the purpose of this? Is it about the coffee? Is it about the carpet? What's it about? And so she went back and challenged that church about that. And what they decided was it was about the fellowship, and that the coffee was part of that fellowship. And it wasn't about the carpet. It wasn't about how long to keep the carpet. In fact, somebody in their congregation said, I hope we wear out this carpet faster than we did this last time. It's not about preserving it, because we could keep everybody outside the church and we keep that carpet for forever, right? But then nobody comes in and no one gets to do the things that churches do because they lost sight of that mission. So I agree with that. You have to point out any kind of change that you're going to make that's going to be difficult. You have to go back to the why are we doing this, and how is this going to help us, and what's the missional component. Um, what else can you do to get some buy-in on those courageous decisions?
You guys said it earlier when we were talking about one of the examples, but I think it's just the like listening and addressing people's fears, I think sometimes, or at least affirming them. So you don't have to necessarily resolve all of them, but I think sometimes it's worth looking into like, what are people afraid of, and just asking that question of like, what is it that we're afraid of with, with this decision or with moving in this direction or whatever, and just putting it on the table and seeing, is it legitimate? Like, maybe we need to talk about it. Maybe there's a reason we need to talk about that. And maybe it's just like, we just need to put it out on the table because maybe it's not as scary as we think it is, and we can kind of run down that road a little bit. And so I think that's one thing that you guys were talking about before that I think is a good move as well.
Yeah, when you look the fear in the eye, sometimes it's not as bad as you think it is. I was talking about a nonprofit I was on, Leadership Springfield, that made some really big changes in terms of staffing, and it was really a risky move that threatened the future of the organization, but it also potentially had high risk, high reward for it. And as we were talking about the changes that needed to be made, Mike Brothers, who did a great job as our president during that time, spent time going to everybody who was still concerned and just listened to their concerns. Just said, just tell me what you're worried about and let's talk through it. And one by one, I think as the board members talked about their concerns, from one, they felt heard. So they felt like we're on the same page. We're trying to work towards this and we're making considerations for it. And then second, I think some of them realized that some of the fears weren't as fearful as we thought. Like, okay, the worst case scenario would be, and then we had a way to get back. So there was a way that it would be embarrassing and it would be difficult, but it wasn't undoable, that there was a way to get back. And we ended up getting full support from the board for the change. So we had a unanimous decision to move forward, which definitely came in handy as we started struggling through the different changes that we were implementing. Because those changes that we're talking about, when you're making a courageous decision, I'm not just talking about picking what color the carpet is or something like that. Sometimes those decisions have a lot of risk associated with them, and sometimes those decisions might be wrong. I spoke to a leader of a company who's in his 80s, brilliant leader, recently, and he told me, he says, I think that our job is to make these really hard decisions sometimes for the company based on our mission, as Diana said before, of where we're going. And if I'm right 51% of the time, I feel like I did my job. If I'm right 100% of the time, I feel like I didn't make enough decisions. I feel like I must have been too scared to make the other decisions, because when we know that if you make a tough decision, you know you might be wrong, and but there's worthiness then in that decision too. So good. Any other advice in terms of those who are thinking about making courageous decisions? What about like a frontline employees considering, like, I might want to raise my hand and try to go for that supervisor position, but now everybody's going to treat me differently at lunch. Like, what's the advice for that person?
My advice to everyone is always dig your well before you need it. Always build the trust first. Always know the people around you. Always build those relationships before you need them. And I think building those relationships early, it makes it easier to raise your hand in those moments. It makes it easier to say, I do want to do something more. And then it also helps you get buy-in on those decisions later because these people trust you now. So I'm always about digging the well before you need it.
That's good. And even there's a moment, even no matter how much the rest of the team trusts you in that moment, and you get promoted and suddenly you're the boss, no matter how much they trust you, there's still a weirdness that's going to settle in, right? On Monday. So then it's your consistency of continuing, like with what you were doing before, with like the discussions, the listening to people, that kind of stuff. It may change a little bit in terms of like going out for drinks after work or things like that. Some of that might have to change a little bit, but you're still showing consistency in who you are. You're still the person that you were before. You don't have to suddenly change everything that you are to be a manager of a team. You can still keep that core of yourself. Those are hard decisions to make, and we've worked with even people in manufacturing who are in a union and have to leave the union to take that job. And then the risk is you might not get the job. You might have raised your hand and people know you applied for it, and then you didn't even get it. And so, I mean, those are all risky decisions. But I know there's been a lot of studies that show like our success. And if you think about in your life, the moments you've made a leap, you've made a big change or a step up, it was probably some risk you took, probably some risky decision that you made. Oh, I am going to go out on that date to meet with that person, even though I know that might turn out bad. Or I am going to take that job with that tiny little company that is in an old abandoned apartment complex. I'm looking at Diana as I'm saying that, because that's exactly what she did. Came into an old abandoned apartment complex when we were didn't have a filing cabinet or a phone or barely a name, and came in and took a big risk. And look how wonderful her life is now. And it's all because of what we did, right? Isn't that what you'd say, Diana?
Yep, exactly word for word verbatim.
That's great. No sarcasm dripping from your voice there at all. But those risky moments, I mean, they changed companies, they transformed companies, right? It could have saved Blockbuster. It has saved other companies. You know, I thought I've learned this the other day. You know how old Nintendo is? When do you think Nintendo was founded? Anybody know the answer to that?
I believe it was in like the 1800s.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. So obviously they weren't making video game consoles in the 1800s.
No.
Right? I think they were making like playing cards or games or things like that, I think is what the company made. So obviously that's a company that has evolved a lot.
Or they were way ahead of their time. They just were really spinning their wheels for like a
They
hundred
were
and
like space
years.
aliens and had technology that no one else had.
Just waiting for people
Just
to catch
pass
up.
it along to all the generations until they're ready and then introduce it.
That is funny thought. Just that like we've invented this thing. Would somebody please invent the TV so that we can connect to this thing?
We got to plug it in somewhere. Where do we put that? Where do we plug this in? Yeah, where's the TV? That's fine.
They even invented Mario Brothers before there were plumbers. That's even harder. That shows how far ahead of the time they were at Nintendo. Good shout out to Nintendo. Good job. Good job for being visionaries. That's fantastic. Well, I think our message for this one, this has been a good discussion, is look, we know that there are decisions that are out there that are difficult to make. If you are a leader, I think you have a responsibility to make those decisions. And when I say if you are a leader, I'm kind of going back to what our definition of a leader is, which is a trick question because you all are leaders. I don't just mean if you're a manager, you have a responsibility to yourself and to who you are to sometimes make courageous decisions that are a little bit risky for yourself. To advance yourself, to put you in a better position, to lead a better life. And if you are running an organization or you're a leader and you're making decisions for other people, that's even more magnified. Your roof is bigger and so yes, you have more weight from the snow on your roof, but that means you can't just hold that spot. If you're just holding that spot and you're just playing it safe because you've worked so hard to get there and you don't want to risk it, my advice that I put in the article was then leave that job, take a demotion, get out of the way so somebody else can make the bigger, harder decisions that are up there. With that increased responsibility comes increased responsibility of making harder decisions, right? That's part of all of that. So thanks a lot for joining us on this one. Thanks for being courageous and listening. Thanks for stepping out and thinking about how you can develop yourself as a leader as you listen to our podcast. And thanks for working towards becoming more people centric. And we're going to go eat some soup. I can't wait because it smells amazing. And we will see you at the next episode of the People Centric Podcast.